Hello, my name is Meg, and I will be the first negative speaker. It is extremely important that the NSA uses surveillance in order to protect the United States from both exterior and interior terrorism and criminal attacks. Contrary to my opponent's main claim, using cell phone records as a way to protect the United States and its citizens is pertinent for preventing future terrorist attacks, completely legal due to the fact that metadata, not actual content, is being recorded, and is completely legal under the Constitution and the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act of 1978. Let me start off with a poll done by Jason Howerton of The Blaze on the majority of Americans who prefer to have security over privacy. Roughly 56% of Americans believe it is acceptable for the spy agency to secretly collect the telephone call records of millions of Americans. Gerald Walpin of the National Review states that the Federalist Papers, the Bible of the Constitution's meaning, warn at the onset of those who invoke supposed rights of the people to oppose the government's efforts to defeat an enemy seeking to destroy us, meaning that they would rather have, that quote kind of means that they would rather have privacy over the fear of having an attack. The United States is not the only country that uses surveillance, and we would most likely be falling behind if we decided not to use surveillance. Jim Reeves of Information Weekly states that while the NSA is one of the biggest and most effective surveillance entities, they aren't alone. Every country is spying on its enemies, its allies, and its own people. The degrees are different and the sophistication will vary, but the principles, or lack thereof, are the same. Many of the United States allies work in alliance with the NSA, giving the United States an upper hand. Jim Reeves of Information Reading states that many of the NSA requests for customer information from the U.S. tech companies are actually made on behalf of the allied countries. We are one disclosure away from any number of countries being embarrassed by the collaboration with the NSA. As our enemies become more intelligent and aggressive, it is pertinent that we use technology to outsmart them. We shouldn't be disarming We shouldn't be disarming as our enemies grow more sophisticated and aggressive, and we certainly should not be doing so based on a campaign of disinformation launched in the wake of an unlawful actions of Edward Snowden. And that's kind of about the Edward Snowden incident. The next point that I have is the NSA's collection of metadata. The definition of metadata is data that describes other data. Meta is a prefix that in most information technology usages means an underlying definition or description. Metadata summarizes basic information about data, which may be finding and working with particular instances of making data easier. There is no Glenn Greenwald of The Guardian stated in May 2015 about the mass amounts of data collected from phone companies by the government. Under the terms of the blanket order, the numbers of both parties on a call are handed over, as is location data, call duration, unique identifiers, and the time and duration of the calls. The contents of the conversation itself are not covered, meaning that the actual content of all the conversations within the phone calls are not being recorded. It's just basic information about the call. According to Barton Gellman of the Washington Post, there is no element of the intelligence community that under any authority is intentionally collecting bulk cell phone information about cell phones in the United States. The NSA only records metadata, not personal information or actual telephone conversations. My third point is that under the Constitution and the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act of 1978, the collection of metadata is completely constitutional. The Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act of 1978 provides procedures for collecting foreign intellectual information in the most constitutional way possible. The Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act of 1978 is a United States federal law which prescribes procedures for the physical and electronic surveillance and collection of foreign intelligence information between foreign powers and agents of foreign powers. Our founding fathers intended for the use of programs like the NSA to protect and defend our country. According to Gerald Walpin, the government's powers for the common defense ought to exist without limitation, because it is impossible to foresee or define the extent and variety of national agencies or the correspondent extent and variety of the means which may be necessary to satisfy them. Our founding fathers opposed every project that is calculated to disarm the government in a single weapon, which means that the government, like things like this, were set up to defend our government and not to harm it. In one case, the High Court ruled against plaintiffs challenging the FISA, which is the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act of 1978. The Supreme Court ruled against plaintiffs who were challenging the FISA Amendments Act. The ruling did not reach the constitutional merits. Rather, the High Court held that since the plaintiffs couldn't prove that they had personally been targets of the surveillance authorized by Section 702, they didn't have standing to challenge the law, which means they didn't have any evidence against the NSA or the information that they had collected. In short, using NSA surveillance methods such as the recording of cell phone records is beneficial more than harmful to the U.S. citizens. Thank you.